I think we're set. All right, welcome to Wednesday Night Slides number 45. The bulk of the show is going to be a big trip I just finished off in the Southland. I will call that program up here. We'll get things going here. But first, you got some current events we'll take care of first. I got to share the screen, don't I? That would help. You think I'd be able to do this after, after 45 shows? Okay, y'all should be seeing Rock Island diesels there.
Correct the window with.
Okay. We're gonna start with some current events first, though, and what's going to happen is we're going to head out, do some light photo sessions I was recently doing to start things off. But of course, actually, first is a commercial message. Just started working on my Pennsylvania Steam book, a 40-year retrospective, same as mine, South Jersey and Philly books, stuff I shot over the last 40 years. Strasburg, East Broad Top, everything good about Pennsylvania Steam. Here's a sample spread for the Strasburg that I've worked on so far. I'm not sure I'm happy with the layouts yet. The books I've learned tend to have a mind of their own. As you get into them, they tend to tell you how they want to be designed. So we'll see how this actually turns out. Here's a spread on the on K4 1361. That's on pre-sale right now on my website for $39 plus shipping. www.railroadphotographer.com/books. As usual, if you have any comments or questions during the show, feel free to unmute yourself. Just press your space bar on your computer, make your comment, ask your question, and we'll take it from there. All right, we're going to start off down in Tuckahoe, New Jersey on Cape May Seashore Lines. They did a night photo session back in end of September to benefit the Volunteer Railroaders Association. Here we see an ex-Pennsylvania Reading Seashore Lines RDC next to a Pennsylvania Railroad coach. Tuckahoe was the dividing point for South Jersey trains going to Cape May, which would be off to the left, or to Ocean City, which would be off to the right. Another view of the same scene. There's the Tuckahoe Depot. That's still there. We have the Pennsy cars over on the Cape May line, and then the stainless cars over on the Ocean City line. Here we have a Jersey Central car that used to run on the Blue Comet. It is next to a Pennsylvania Railroad car that probably did not run on the PRSL's crack train in Nellie Bly. But you would have seen these two railroads like this side by side in Atlantic City at the terminal there back in the day. The sad part is I have a Nellie Bly drumhead, an original one. And if I had known they were going to do this scene, I would have brought that. We've had drumheads on both trains next time. Tuckahoe Tower is also still there. Here we see Cape May Seashore Lines GP 38-22661, which just happens to be a former Pennsylvania Reading Seashore Lines locomotive. So it's on its home rails here, originally PRSL 2011. Oops, I took that out. Then I headed up to North Jersey the following day. That was a Friday night. This is Saturday. Following day, hit up North Jersey, but I made a quick stop at the Black River and Western. You see their Great Western 280 number 60. Here we see it going past the Hogtown Station outside of Ringo's, New Jersey. The destination was the yard and shop of the United Railroad Historical Society of New Jersey up in Boonton. New Jersey Transit actually painted the CNJ 4109. It's in regular commuter train service. They sent it over to the Boonton site for the organization's museum for a day, which was the following day on Sunday. The Boonton site is largely a work area. It's cramped. It's a shop area. It's got a lot of stuff going on. But once a year, they try to clean things up and spread things out and do a museum for a day event to raise awareness of what they're trying to eventually accomplish with a New Jersey Railroad Museum. I have yet to catch the 4109 on a regular service train. They also have some Pennsylvania Railroad equipment. Here we see a GG1 alongside of an EMB Jeep. And New York Central. That's the observation car, Hickory Creek on the left. E8 4083 on the right in the jade green. New York Central painted, I think, 4 E8s in an experimental jade green paint scheme back in the early 1960s. And 4083 just happened to be one of the 4 that was painted in that color. And the final scene was a Jersey Central Jeep being lifted up by a former Erie crane. A couple of days later, actually the next day, Sunday night, I went over to the Westchester Railroad. They had run trains that day for their 25th anniversary. And while they're putting stuff away, we asked if they wouldn't mind posing a few things for night photos. The short answer was yes, but there's a much longer answer that we won't get into. With the alien bees, the key now is to get started right after sunset, because with you can get some really nice effect with the with light in the sky still, different cloud effects and things like that. This is a B&O Alpha. They just painted up. And that's their regular motive power there on the left-hand side, one of the regular locomotives they use. Fresh out of the paint shop, I believe. They tend to change paint schemes once every 3 or 4 weeks in that railroad for whatever reason. And here they are with their 25th anniversary banner at the conclusion of the event. Headed over to SMS, which is mostly known for its Baldwins. They're located about 10 minutes from where I am here, up in Bridgeport, New Jersey. They just acquired SW 1200 number 104 from the Carneys Point generating plant, which is located, once again, not far from here. But the generating plant shifted from, shut down on May 31st. It was coal-fired. So SMS bought the 104 and it had a real good paint job on it. All they did was add lettering in the silver stripe. That it was no lettering there before, and took off some of the generating plant graphics. And of course, since they got a new engine, we asked if they would pose it for some night photos for us, and they, of course, obliged. They're known for their Baldwins, but they've been using EMDs, GEs, whatever they have around for the switching of late. Not that they're anti-Baldwin, just the other ones are a little more convenient to use at the moment. But if any rail fan is heading towards SMS to shoot the Baldwins, all you got to do is give them a day or 2 notice that you're coming and you want a Baldwin to switch that day, and they'll generally be able to accommodate you and run a Baldwin for you. Inside the shop is what will soon be Woodstown Central number 9. I went to high school in Woodstown. The branch there is now being restored as a tourist operation by SMS. It's an ex-Army, ex-New Hope and Ivy Land 060, coming together nicely. They're to the point now where they're just putting piping and jacketing back on it again. And they hope to have it running by Easter 2023. It's been reunited with its tender. It's coming together pretty nice. Also in the shop is 6-axle Baldwin 554, ex-Kroner Railway. It's getting a major once over now. And there's inside of a Baldwin. The 6 axles are a little too much for SMS's industrial park operation in Bridgeport. A lot of tight switches and curves and stuff. So there's a pretty good chance this will wind up over on the Salem branch along with the number 9 at some point in the future. All right, off to the big trip. About a week and a half ago, me and Mike Burkhart and John Regan headed west. Our goal was to get Kansas City Southern one last time before it became part of Canadian Pacific. Our first day was just all driving, and we got as far as Mount Juliet, Tennessee. Next morning, we headed over to Lebanon, Tennessee to get what used to be the Music City Star. It's now known as WeGo. Their lineup of F40s at their shop area. That row of ballast cars on the right blocks you from getting a ground level shot. So the only way to do this was to fly the drone into the shop area and snap a photo. From there, we went to the nearby Nashville and Eastern Yard, just around the corner. Saw some of their power. They're part of RJ Corman now. Then stopped in Jackson, Tennessee, to see the Casey Jones Village. They have what they have disguised as Illinois Central 382, Casey Jones's locomotive. They did get the wheel arrangement right, but it's not the same engine by any stretch of the imagination. They also have a caboose on stilts. From there, we went to Memphis, and we shot the streetcar line on Main Street. Here we see one of their ex-Melbourne cars heading south on Main Street. We're standing at the end of the line, the south end, down by the Illinois Central Station. Not far from there is what is now the National Civil Rights Museum, the Lorraine Motel, where Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. was assassinated back in 1968. The place is like a magnet. There's just so much history there that you can't walk past it without being drawn to it. So we went over there for a few shots. Like I said, you just really can't just walk past the place. Then it was back over to Main Street for more streetcars. Here we see a fairly new Brill replica built by Gamaco. Used to run in Charlotte. It's now over in Memphis. Oh, and back over to the Lorraine for a better shot of the sign. It was a big crowd around it when we were there first time. So this is now the National Civil Rights Museum. Then over to the Orpheum Theater, get another Melbourne car. The Life Kitchen sign on top of the hotel there. Car heading north. And a car going past Beale Street at the corner of Main and Beale. From there, it was off to Central Barbecue for some Memphis ribs. Oh, before we did that, though, we stopped at CN Junction, one of the busiest spots in Memphis. Busy east-west line that goes across the Mississippi River. It crosses over a former Illinois Central line that is largely used only for the city of New Orleans to access the passenger station. There's a freight bypass around the station that's used by almost all the freights. Next day, we are west of Fort Smith, Arkansas, north of Spiro, Oklahoma, on Kansas City Southern, waiting for a train to cross over the Arkansas River. Took us 3 hours, but we got our train. And this train was heading south, and that was the way we were going, so we decided to chase it. We got down near Heavener, and we got this northbound train coming along. But basically, we just stayed with the southbound and picked off northbounds as we found them. Here's our southbound train coming out of Heavener. And this is on the line over Rich Mountain in Arkansas, right on the Oklahoma-Arkansas border. And then at Rich Mountain, they had a meet. Here, this is just north of the siding at North Rich Mountain. And now our train is proceeding, passing the train that's in the siding at North Rich Mountain. That's the helper on the back of our train. Most of the trains on this part of KCS had distributed power units, rear end helper units. That's the helper going away. And out comes the northbound train with a door in primer paint. And that's his DPUs going away. We caught up to our southbound again. This is his rear end helper, pan shot. We are now in DeQueen, Arkansas. Short line railroad there, the DeQueen and Eastern, that's one of their locomotives. And there's their Veterans Tribute locomotive in the yard there. And our southbound caught up with us again in DeQueen, right about sunset. Next morning, we're in Ashdown, Arkansas, north of Texarkana. This cool SD40 was working the yard there. There's a Domtar paper plant just off to the left. We got a switcher sign there to work that. We were waiting for a southbound train, but first this northbound Union Pacific coal train showed up. And here you see the switcher on the left. That's our southbound train we're waiting for in the middle. And then on the right-hand side is the pusher on the back of that UP coal train. So line up of 3 KCS locomotives here. And here comes our train out of the after the meet coming through Ashdown, heading south. We discovered really fast that you couldn't chase a train from here down through Texarkana. They just go way too fast. They're doing 60 plus, and you're on 2-lane roads with small towns and traffic lights. Just didn't work out. We wound up down near Texas Junction, just north of Shreveport. All we got there was this southbound oil train with Canadian Pacific Power on it. And then that's the back end of that oil train. And then this northbound came out. We went over to Gibbsland to see if Louisiana and Northwest had any power laying around for maybe night shots. They didn't. They did have this very cool old station there, though, that was worth a photo or two. I converted this to black and white, but I kind of like the yellow lettering popping out a little bit better, but that's the black and white version. Next morning, we were in Vicksburg, Mississippi, where KCS has a big bridge over the Mississippi River. This is the Meridian Speedway, jointly shared by KCS and Norfolk Southern. The bridge used to be dual railroad and highway. US 80 used to cross this bridge. Roadway is still there. You can see the ramp just to the right of the locomotives going down to the bridge. We chased this train through the Washington Street Tunnel, more of an overpass. Trains do 10 miles an hour on the bridge. So as long as the back end is still on the bridge, you can get ahead of the front end pretty easy. And then we continued on with our little chase in downtown Vicksburg. This is the helper unit on the back of that train going away. Another KCS train coming across the bridge at Vicksburg. You can get a good idea of the size of the bridge here. Once again, it's old US 80, now closed off to the right, although it's still used for bridge maintenance. And the Mississippi River right now is at record lows. You can see all that shore bank over there on the far side. That's not normally there. Usually the water's up to the trees, but it's record lows on the Mississippi River. Did shoot some river traffic between trains. And then a Norfolk Southern unit came across, intermodal train. Same train. We headed from there over to Jackson, Mississippi, a place called Switch Tender. It's where the KCS crosses over the former Canadian National Illinois Central. It doesn't cross it on a diamond, though. It crosses it through a series of switches. KCS running west to east will come in, turn south, briefly join and cross over the IC on switches, and then break back to the east while the IC is straight north-south from here. It's called Switch Tender because at one time there was a switch tender base there who would throw all these switches to get trains on their proper tracks. Here we see a northbound KCS train coming through Switch Tender. And a southbound train. The Standard Life building, that's the highlight of the Jackson skyline. Built in the late 1920s, and is now housing, residential building. Meanwhile, I was getting a little frustrated here. We kept getting cloud dinked on all of our trains. And I'm like, you know, my patience was beginning to wear a little bit thin. Another northbound. A lot of stuff I brightened up in Lightroom, but we were getting persistently dogged by the clouds. Finally, got sun, got a train, and it's running long hood forward. So that goes under the nice try category. Then Amtrak showed up, and unexpectedly, and we jumped out of the car. We were sitting in the car waiting for the trains to come. Jumped out of the car and didn't chance to set the camera at all. So this is what the camera saw. Once again, under clouds. But through a little bit of work in Lightroom, that's my final result from the shot. Because I had to brighten it up so much, I got a lot of the reflection of the clouds on the locomotive, which is why it's not the real nice dark blue that it should be. Finally, a CN train and sun pointing in the right direction. So it's feeling a whole lot better by this point. And to top it all off, you got a KCS train right at sunset. So that was our adventure with the KCS, but we still weren't finished with the trip. We had other things to do. So we headed over to Greenwood, Mississippi. Basically, we were staying in the general vicinity of Clarksdale, Mississippi. We had an appointment there that night. We'll see that in a few minutes. So we weren't wandering very far from Clarksdale. So we were in Greenwood, and this CN train unexpectedly showed up, and I got this half-baked shot of it going past the Greenwood Amtrak station. Here comes Amtrak southbound city of New Orleans in the Greenwood. And then we got a southbound train, CN train. Apparently the clock in my camera is a little bit off. This is these two shots are out of sequence when I synchronized them. This is the drone shot. I'm actually up at the grade crossing at the upper right of the picture, and this would have been the shot just a couple of seconds earlier. I think my camera's clock is off by about a minute. I don't think the drone's inaccurate. I think that gets it from GPS. We headed about 7 miles south of Greenwood for this shot here of CN southbound on a big curve. That's about all we saw. It was day. We were mostly just shooting whatever we could find, but mostly waiting because we had to head up to Clarksdale. We did stop back in Greenwood. The Columbus and Greenville has a switcher base there. That's their switcher sitting there. Probably one of at least 2 locomotives. I would guess there was one out working in the industries that day. We're heading up to the brand new Rock Island operation out of Clarksdale. I think officially it's the Mississippi Delta Railroad, but the owner of the Mississippi Delta discovered that all of the Rock Island trademarks that had expired were available, so we snapped them up. You'll see the result of that in a second. On the way up to Clarksdale, we found this other locomotive, next BNSF locomotive that Rock Island also purchased, thus the RI stenciling under the cab windows there. And here's our goal. The bankruptcy blue Rock Island painted locomotives. They live in Clarksdale. They don't wander very far very often. The railroad runs, it's really an as-needed railroad. And despite good intel, the railroad's operations just didn't line up for us this week at all. But we had asked in advance if they would mind having a crew on duty on this particular night to move the engines if needed and work the headlights for night photos, and they agreed. Engineer Tim stayed late, and we got there, and they're 4310. It's the American Rail fan. How about that? So Engineer Tim stayed late, and this is still not night photos. We'll get to that in a minute. I keep forgetting what else happened. We also went over to the Columbus and Greenville used to operate this line, apparently. Some of their equipment is still in Clarksdale, just sitting there. When and if it'll ever get moved, who knows? Okay, now we're back up to Clarksdale, to the Rock Island. They pulled the engines out to this nice grassy area at sunset and posed them for us. Engineer Tim and Conductor Joe. They had a long day, but they stayed around and let us do shots. Once again, we started right at sunset, so we had some color in the sky still. Engineer Tim is actually on the front of the locomotive, and Conductor Joe is actually up in the cab. They swapped roles for the night photos. And one of Tim's friends is an engineer for the Columbus and Greenville. And he contacted his friend and found out the Columbus and Greenville had a train running from Greenville over to Greenwood the next day. We had many short line options we could choose from for the following day, but everything else was going to be go over to the railroad and hope they're running. The Columbus and Greenville was the only railroad we knew was running, so that's what we chose. We headed over towards Greenville, and here comes the Columbus and Greenville train heading west. Cool line, a lot of neat bridges and things on it. We really enjoyed this chase. Columbus and Greenville is part of the Genesee and Wyoming family, thus the Genesee Wyoming corporate colors of orange and black. But hey, the engine's painted nice, pointing in the right direction, and the railroad is pretty cool. This cotton field was not as good as some of the other cotton fields we saw. Some of them were still really white with cotton. This one here was a little past prime. Here's one of those, one of the many bridges that crosses over. This is from the drone. We found some neat photo props along the tracks to incorporate into the photos. Now we're coming up into the outskirts of Greenwood near the end of our chase. We need to start getting home. So we made a big jump over to Columbus, the home base of the Columbus and Greenville. They have this, their very first locomotive, this Baldwin built 601 sitting out in front of the shop. So we did some night photos here. Even has its own historical marker next to it. This is Friday. We still have a lot of miles to cover the next 2 days to get home by Sunday night. But we started the next morning off in Huntsville, Alabama. Off to the left is the only Saturn V rocket on display in an upright position in the United States. I think now this is not a real Saturn V. This is actually a replica Saturn V. I think there's 4 other surviving complete Saturn V's that were not used in the moon missions. In the building at the base of the rocket is a real Saturn V on its side, which is how most of them are displayed. Anyhow, I got an NS train going by the upright Saturn V in Huntsville. That was on my hit list. The Huntsville and Madison County Railroad is located in Huntsville as well. We went over to their yard and shot their stuff. XGE lease locomotives. Then there's this tourist operation out of outside of Huntsville, the Mercury and Chase, which I didn't know about. Mike knew about it, so we went over to shoot them running their pumpkin trains. They have Alcos, and they run them pool style, an Alco on each end of the train. They also have this ex-Army MRS-1. This Alco here is ex-Lackawanna. Used to run up in New Jersey way back when. And that's the train going away. All the little kitties with their pumpkins. They also have this other Alco we found sitting at their shop. A little bit rough shape, but it has its U.S. steel heritage is still showing under the cab window. And this was a caboose. You can tell by the steps and the ladder, the brake wheel ladder there. Obviously a wooden caboose at one time. Bit of a fire issue. From there, it was just miles with stops along the way. We got as far as Bridgeport, Alabama, where the Sequatchie Valley Railroad is based. Their stuff wasn't really shootable. This is a telephoto from the opposite hillside. Also in Bridgeport is this way cool bridge, thus the name. The bridge on the right was the railroad bridge up until the 1990s. CSX built a new bridge on the left and then donated the bridge on the right to the town for a walking trail. We got the slight engine move heading south across the new bridge. The station there on the right-hand side is now a museum. They got this EMD switcher and a caboose sitting out in front of it. And the bridge you just saw would be further behind the station. Follow the tracks around through an S-curve and the bridge is out there over the Tennessee River. Then we're back to the Tennessee River again, but now we're up in Chattanooga. This is at a place called Ten Bridge, currently Norfolk Southern line. It's on the CNO and T, Cincinnati, New Orleans, and Texas Pacific Railroad, which is a railroad that's actually owned by the city of Cincinnati and leased to Norfolk Southern. This is an angle I've never gotten at Ten Bridge before. Usually you can shoot from the park and get the entire bridge across the Tennessee River here, which is best for southbounds. This is a northbound, so around to the broadside of it. In the background under the bridge is Chickamauga Dam, the Tennessee Valley Authority project. Next day, we got as far as Abingdon, Virginia that night. Next day, it was just a drive home. But we, thanks to ATCS monitor, which lets you see where trains are, like dispatchers see them on the display. We knew the southbound was coming, so we got the southbound going past the depot at Marion. We knew Buckingham Branch had a new tourist train operation out of Stanton, Virginia. So we went up to Stanton to check out the tourist train operation. Thought maybe we'd chase it a little bit. One engine, one car is all it is. But when we saw the train was running long hood forward, it changed our plans. It wasn't worth sticking around for, so we pushed on north. But before we did that, we went over to the Buckingham Branch's yard and stand, shot some of their power there. Also in town is the Shenandoah Valley Railroad with some really cool painted stuff. The B&O Jeep was always a little bit painted a little bit on the white side from true B&O blue, royal blue, but it's gotten a lot lighter over the years as the paint has faded. And there's a locomotive rebuilder in Stanton that operates on a siding behind a grain mill out in the open. That's the shop right there. Currently, Big Mike Gee is the locomotive sitting in the shop getting rebuilt. Once again, we saw on the ATCS monitor there was a southbound train coming, and we could pick him off in Luray, Virginia. So we went into Luray, got this shot here, pretty much where Winston Ling shot one of his famous night shots way back in the day. That's going to wrap things up for this show. The next one is going to be November 30th, the night after, the week after Thanksgiving. I'll have taken another trip or two in the meantime, and we'll have some current stuff, and we'll try to find another golden oldie subject to present then as well. That's November 30th to be the next show. I'm going to sign this off for the YouTube people, and then